Hello everyone, welcome back to ENR 153 car project tutorial videos. In today's video we will be building the wheel mount for the car project. So as you guys notice, we have a front configuration and there will be a rear configuration for this part. It's a fairly simple part, right? So we're going to start with a sketch. We'll utilize the mid-plane extrusion, and then we have two 832s tapped holes on my top face, and then I have a 1024 tapped hole on my front face. So let's switch to my rear configuration really quick. So as you guys can notice, the only difference is that hole on my front face. So everything else is the same. All of my geometry is basically the same. So what we can do is utilize the configuration commands in Solidworks, and what that does is basically it's going to take that geometry and replicates it in a different configuration, so we don't have to go back and rebuild the whole part again, since it utilizes very similar geometry. Again, the only difference is this straight hole that's on the front face, and then on our front configuration we actually have a tapped hole. Also the size is different, but for the two holes on my top face, they're the same in both configurations. So let's jump into SolidWorks and get this started. So I have SolidWorks open. I'm just going to go to File, New. It's a part file. I'm going to start a new part file. Hit OK. So the drawing calls the units in inches. So I have IPS, inch, pound, seconds. So that's all set. One thing to double check is that decimal points, and on the drawing we realize 3 decimal points. So I'm just going to edit document units. Let's go ahead and change my decimal points to 3. Click OK. And we're all set to go ahead and start sketching. So again, I'm going to utilize my top plane to start my first sketch. So go to sketch. What that does, it takes me to normal to my top plane now. And we're going to start with a center rectangle. Again, I want it to be coincident with the origin. So I'm going to make sure that it snaps to the origin. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag out. My sketch is underdefined, and the reason is even though it is coincident with the origin, it's not defined dimensionally, so I don't know what my length and width is for that rectangle. So let's go ahead and utilize Smart Dimension to fully define my sketch. So my length is 0.750, and my width is 0.375. So I have a fully defined sketch. So we can go ahead and click OK. So I'm going to close that dimensioning dialog. Right, we're all set with dimensioning. I'm going to go ahead. I want to convert that sketch to a 3D boss. So I'm going to switch to my Features tab, and I'm going to realize this extruded boss base. Excuse me. And for my end condition, I actually want to utilize the mid plane. I want my origin to be centered about my top plane. It makes it easier when I center that 1024 hole on my front face. I can snap to the origin. Again, it's good to start thinking about my design intent early on, right? I want to think about, so look at the drawing and start thinking, okay, what's the most efficient way to go about building this part? Again, we don't have to utilize the mid-plane extrusion. We can do a blind, but again, it's having that origin to snap to will make fully defining that 1024 hole easier later on. So again, my mid-plane extrusion is going to be 0.375 inches. So I have my overall shape. Now let's jump in and add those holes. So I'm going to utilize my hole wizard. It's going to be a straight tab for those two top holes, and it's gonna be NC inch. It's gonna be a tapped hole. Again, I'm gonna go to my size, and it's gonna be an 832. It's gonna be a through all condition. That's what the drawing calls out, with thread call out. So let's go to positions. So I'm done fully defining the type of hole, right? So it's a straight tab, NC inch. It's a tapped hole. That's what we want, and it's going to be an 832. Let's jump to our positions tab. And it's asking select the face for the hole or slot position. Again, we want to locate those two holes on the top face. So I'm going to click on my top face. And what I like to do is I actually just going to go to my looking at it from that top view. I want it to be horizontal with respect to the origin. So the nice thing about Solidworks, if I get close, it shows this blue line, a preview, and it shows that horizontal relation. So I want to utilize that, and I'm gonna do the same thing here. So my point is blue. That means I'm underdefined. So before I define it, I want to add a relation between these 2 points. And I'm gonna add a horizontal relation. What that basically does, if I move this one, both holes move. I'm also gonna add another relation between this point, again, this point or this point. They're both linked, so it doesn't matter which one you select, and my origin. I'm also going to add a horizontal relation. So that means both holes are related horizontally with respect to the origin. They're also related with each other. So now I can't move them up or down because they're related with respect to the origin horizontally. So let's do this. I know that this distance needs to be 0.150 and this distance needs to be 0.600. Also, one thing I want to double check is on the drawing, it calls out that this distance is 0.188. And again, that's because it's related horizontally with respect to the origin, but we can add a, just to double check, and it won't let me add that because it's already related, right? I would have to delete one of those relations between the hole and the origin before I can dimension that. So it's gonna ask me, hey, would you like to delete one, make them, and use this dimension to derive that, or make this driven? Again, it's fully defined the way how I added that relation, and I only basically added the dimensions in the x direction, right? I locked the y by adding a relation with respect to the origin. It's horizontally related. So let's click OK. So I have my two tapped holes. The last thing I need to do, again, jump back to hole wizard. And what I'm gonna do, so again, there's gonna be a third hole that's a 1024. So again, it's a tabbed hole, so we don't need to change anything. The nice thing about Solidworks is it remembers your last used settings, so it doesn't reset every time you go in. So all my settings are the same. The only thing that changed this time around is the size of the hole. So let's go ahead and jump in and change the size to 1024. So we're all set here. Let's jump to the positions tab. And I want it to be on my front face. And that's when again, we did a midpoint extrusion, so it's easier for me to snap to that midpoint, the origin. And that will actually fully define my hole. So we can go to our front. What that does actually, so if I snap anywhere here, it's going to be underdefined, but if I actually snap to the origin, it's going to be fully defined. That's all it needs. It's defined with respect to the origin. So I have my front configuration all done. One thing I want to do is I want to, again, assign the right material. So it's a 6061 aluminum. So let's go to my aluminum alloys, and it's going to be a 6061. Scroll down a bit. 6061 alloy, I'm going to hit apply. And so SolidWorks has a built-in appearance for every single material. What I'm going to do, so I'm done with my front configuration. What I want to do next is, again, create the rear configuration. And the only thing that's different about the rear configuration is the hole, this hole. So in the front configuration, we utilize the straight tab, a tapped hole, and in the rear configuration, we're going to utilize the just straight hole. So if I jump into my configuration manager, click on it, so left click. So right now I have this default, and that's what each configuration. So what I want to do is on this part, I'm gonna add a configuration. So right click on part 2 configurations, I'm gonna add. And for the configuration name, I'm just gonna do rear. Click OK. And for this one, I'm going to go to properties. I'm just going to change the name for my default configuration to front, so I can distinguish between my front and rear configuration. So if I want to toggle back between the two, I can just double click on each configuration, and the one that has the green check mark next to it is the one that's the active configuration at that point. So again, the rear configuration is active now. If I want to toggle back to my front, just double click on my front, and then it's the active one. So in the rear configuration, so now it's active, I'm gonna suppress this. I don't want to delete it. I'm gonna suppress it from that configuration. What that does, if I jump back to my front, that tapped hole is still there on my front configuration. You don't want to delete it, you want to suppress it. Again, so if I go to rear, it's suppressed in this configuration. And now what I want to do, if I go to my hole wizard, it's gonna be a hole. Show decimal values, and this hole is 0.236. So so it seems like the letter A is the closest. So what I'm going to do is go to A, but I want to do show custom sizing because I want to call it out to 0.236. And that turns yellow. And what that means is we're now utilizing the custom size. And if I go to my positions tab now, again, it's going to be on my front face. And I'm just going to, again, make sure it's coincident to my origin. Gonna click OK. So I have my 2 holes on the top and 2 tapped holes, and I have just a straight hole, my front face, and that's for my rear configuration. So if I jump into my front, again, that 0.236 is suppressed in that configuration, and it's only active in my rear. So we're all set. Let's go ahead and go to File Properties. I'm just gonna put my name in the author. Make sure you do this, because again, we're gonna grab those properties later on when we create drawings. And I'm gonna go to my description and populate that. So it's a 3/8 inch by 3/8 6061 aluminum. Okay. I'm gonna go File, Save As. So I have my folders. Car parts 2. It's going to be the wheel mount. File, save as. We're all set. Thank you for watching.